She laughed in his face and said, "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." Everyone thought it was a joke, until the humble mechanic stepped forward and did the impossible. What happened next left a billionaire speechless and the whole world talking. "You? Fix this engine? If you do, I'll marry you." The entire crowd at the luxury car expo burst into laughter, their voices echoing across the vast showroom filled with gleaming cars, flashing cameras, and the hum of expensive conversation. Some people smirked, others shook their heads, and a few pulled out their phones to record what they thought would be an amusing failure. Standing there, grease-stained hands resting casually in his pockets, was Marcus Turner, a humble black mechanic whose reputation in his small town was built on honesty, hard work, and the uncanny ability to bring even the most hopeless engines back to life. He was used to oil under his fingernails and the smell of gasoline in the air, not polished floors, champagne glasses, and luxury vehicles worth more than his entire shop. His worn jeans had patches on the knees, and his faded work shirt still carried the faint imprint of his garage's logo, now almost invisible from years of washing. In this sea of tailored suits and designer dresses, Marcus looked like he had walked in from another world. The woman who had thrown the challenge was none other than Victoria Hale, the billionaire CEO of Hale Motors, a name that had become synonymous with innovation in the electric vehicle industry. Tall, poised, and exuding an air of absolute authority, she was known as much for her razor-sharp business decisions as she was for her icy, untouchable beauty. Her eyes, cool and calculating, were fixed on Marcus with a mixture of amusement and mild disbelief. Just moments earlier, her company's pride and joy, the latest prototype of a revolutionary electric engine designed to double the range of any vehicle, had sputtered and died during a live demonstration. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of the expo, the announcement that would solidify Hale Motors as the industry leader. Instead, it had become an embarrassing disaster. Her team of top engineers, each one a graduate of the world's best universities, had crowded around the open hood, running tests, muttering to each other, and shaking their heads. No one could figure out what had gone wrong. Meanwhile, a row of investors, men and women whose millions could make or break the future of the project, watched with growing impatience. Marcus hadn't planned to be there. He'd only stopped by to drop off a refurbished gearbox for a friend who was showcasing a vintage car. But as he leaned against the back wall, watching the chaos unfold, something in the way the engine had failed caught his attention. Without thinking, he muttered under his breath, "I could fix that." Someone nearby heard him and, perhaps eager to stir the pot, repeated his words loud enough for others to hear. Within moments, the whisper had traveled through the crowd and reached Victoria herself. Instead of dismissing it, she saw an opportunity for entertainment and maybe, just maybe, a way to lighten the tension in the room. With a sly smile, she turned to face him and delivered the challenge that had now captured everyone's attention. Amused, she had no idea she had just set in motion an event that would change both of their lives forever. "All right, Mr. Mechanic," Victoria smirked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Show us your magic." Marcus didn't answer right away. He simply stepped forward, his boots echoing faintly against the polished floor as he approached the open hood of the sleek silver prototype. The air was tense, charged with a mixture of doubt, amusement, and a flicker of hope from a few who still believed in miracles. Dozens of cameras swiveled toward him, their red recording lights blinking like tiny, unblinking eyes. He could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him. The skeptical glances from the engineers, the impatient tapping of an investor's foot, the smug whispers from those certain he was about to embarrass himself. But Marcus had been here before, in a way. Not in a luxury expo surrounded by million-dollar machines, but in dimly lit garages where broken-down engines sat like wounded soldiers waiting for a second chance. "Do you even know what you're looking at?" One engineer scoffed, stepping back just enough to keep his expensive suit from brushing against Marcus's work shirt. His tone was half mocking, half defensive, as if the stranger's very presence was an insult to his expertise. Marcus didn't look up. His voice was calm, steady. "I know when something's choking," he said, lightly tapping one of the engine's components, "and this beauty is gasping for air." The engineer rolled his eyes, but Victoria's gaze sharpened ever so slightly. Without another word, Marcus got to work. His hands, broad, calloused, and stained from years of labor, moved with the kind of confidence that only comes from experience. He loosened a clamp near the intake valve, his movements swift but deliberate. Then he followed a line of wiring with his fingers, pausing to adjust a connection that seemed almost insignificant to the untrained eye. Out of his pocket came a small, battered handheld diagnostic device. Not the kind you'd see in high-tech labs, but one that had been modified, customized over years of trial and error. The murmurs in the crowd began to swell. Some whispered guesses about what he was doing. Others made bets on how long it would take before he gave up. Victoria stood with her arms crossed, a mask of amusement still painted on her face, but her eyes betrayed her. She found herself leaning slightly forward, watching the way he worked, not hurried, not careless, but with an almost surgical precision. Something about the stillness in his movements made her uneasy and strangely curious. Finally, Marcus straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag that had clearly seen better days. He stepped back from the hood and glanced at the chief engineer. "Try it now," he said simply, as though he hadn't just challenged the skills of some of the best minds in the industry. The chief engineer reluctantly stepped forward, his expression a mixture of doubt and irritation, and pressed the ignition button. For a split second, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Then, instead of the sputtering failure from earlier, a deep, steady hum filled the air. The engine purred, smooth, powerful, and flawless. The sound was almost hypnotic, like a perfectly tuned instrument hitting the right note. A few people leaned in closer, eyes wide, as the dashboard came alive in a cascade of glowing lights. The diagnostics ran themselves automatically, and every system check returned green. No errors, no warnings. The range calculation numbers on the display climbed higher than any projection they had released to the public, higher, in fact, than their most optimistic internal tests. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. The weight of what had just happened took a second to settle in. Then, the gasps began, followed by applause that grew louder and louder until it filled the hall. Investors who had been frowning moments earlier were now whispering excitedly to each other. Engineers stared at the readouts in disbelief, scrolling through the data to make sure it wasn't some kind of glitch. Victoria's confident smirk, the one she wore like armor, slipped away. Her lips parted slightly, her voice quieter than before as she asked, "What did you do?" Marcus, still calm and unshaken by the reaction around him, gave a small shrug. "Your intake valves were misaligned." He began, gesturing toward the engine. The wiring to the power regulator was shorting under load. He paused, letting that sink in before adding, with the faintest hint of a grin, and you had a software feedback loop that was draining the battery every time you accelerated. There was a ripple of murmurs through the engineering team. Her lead engineers looked at each other, some with disbelief, others with embarrassment. They had been working on this prototype for months, testing, retesting, rewriting code, and yet this stranger, with no degree or corporate title, had fixed it in less than an hour. Someone in the crowd, clearly enjoying the moment, shouted, "Guess you have to marry him now." That sparked a wave of laughter and a few playful whistles. Victoria's cheeks flushed ever so slightly, though whether it was from annoyance or something else, no one could tell. Marcus didn't react to the joke. He gave a polite nod to the engineers, stepped back from the car, and began to walk toward the exit. His work, as far as he was concerned, was done. The rest of the room, however, was just beginning to realize they had witnessed something extraordinary. "Wait," Victoria called after him, her voice carrying a firmness that made several people nearby turn their heads. Marcus paused mid-step and glanced back, surprised to see her walking toward him with quick, confident strides. "You can't just fix my engine and leave without telling me who you are." "I'm Marcus," he said simply, his tone modest, almost matter-of-fact. "Just a mechanic." Victoria raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Not just a mechanic," she corrected. "You just saved my company's biggest project in front of our investors. That's worth more than you realize." The hum of conversation in the room shifted. People were already whispering about him. Investors eager to know more, engineers still trying to figure out how he'd spotted the problem so quickly. It didn't take long before Victoria had Marcus standing in the center of a small circle made up of board members, potential clients, and her top staff. Over the next hour, she introduced him to everyone of importance, speaking about his quick fix as if she'd discovered a hidden gem. The questions came rapid fire. How did you learn to diagnose so quickly? What tools did you use? How did you know where to start? Marcus answered each one with humility and a quiet confidence. He explained that he'd been working on machines since he was a teenager, first fixing lawnmowers for neighbors, then cars, then anything with an engine that someone brought his way. No formal degree, no shiny certificate on the wall, just years of trial, error, and relentless curiosity. He spoke about listening to engines the way some people listen to music, about how each sound told him a story of what was wrong and what needed to be done. To the engineers, it was baffling. To the investors, it was fascinating. To Victoria, it was something else. She saw not just a man with skill, but someone with a rare combination of instinct and determination. When the event finally began to wind down, Victoria found him again, away from the crowd. You know, she began, her tone softer now, I wasn't serious about the marriage comment, but I am serious about offering you a job. Marcus chuckled lightly, shaking his head. I'm happy where I am. I fix things. That's enough for me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying him as though he were another puzzle to solve. People like you shouldn't hide in small garages. You could change the industry. You could change everything. Marcus held her gaze for a moment, sensing both the challenge and the sincerity in her words. But for now, he remained silent. Weeks passed, and the story of the mechanic who fixed the billionaire's engine spread far beyond the walls of that luxury car expo. What had started as a few shaky phone videos uploaded to social media turned into a viral sensation. Photos of Marcus standing at the prototype's hood, grease on his hands and calm focus in his eyes, were everywhere, splashed across car blogs, business magazines, and even mainstream news outlets. Comment sections were filled with admiration, surprise, and endless jokes about Victoria keeping her word on the marriage challenge. Marcus, however, kept living life the same way. His small workshop continued to hum with the sound of wrenches turning and engines rumbling. He worked on pickup trucks for farmers, old sedans for single parents, and the occasional classic car brought in by a hobbyist. Fame didn't change him. He never chased interviews or endorsements. If people wanted to talk about him, they could. He still had work to do. One quiet afternoon, the familiar growl of an expensive engine broke the stillness outside. A sleek black car rolled to a stop in front of his shop. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Victoria, not in her polished corporate armor of tailored suits and heels, but in dark jeans, a fitted leather jacket, and sunglasses she slid off as she approached. I came to see if you've changed your mind, she said with a half smile, leaning casually against the car. About the job? Marcus asked, wiping his hands on a rag, though his tone carried a knowing edge. She tilted her head. About the marriage. That earned her a laugh, deep, genuine, and shaking his head in disbelief. You really don't give up, do you? This time, her smirk softened into something warmer. I've met plenty of people who wanted my money, my position, or my name. You didn't want any of that. You just wanted to fix what was broken. And that's rare, Marcus. It's why I can't stop thinking about you. For a long moment, he studied her, seeing none of the public persona that commanded boardrooms and dazzled investors. This was Victoria stripped of the performance, her words carrying an honesty he hadn't expected. Finally, he said quietly, if I say yes, it won't be because of the challenge you made. It'll be because I want to. Her smile widened just enough for him to know she understood. And in that small workshop, surrounded by the familiar scent of oil and the echo of that flawless engine from weeks ago, something shifted. Their story didn't begin with wealth or status. It began with mutual respect, shared admiration, and the simple truth that sometimes love starts by fixing what's broken and then building something new together. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.